大家好，前天 Netflix CFO 接受了一个访谈，熟悉这家公司的朋友应该都知道，他们公司的管理层相对比较低调，除了基本的电话会议，之前的访谈是比较少的，所以呢，我们有必要听一下这个，尤其是 CFO 的访谈之后股价反响非常不好，股价一天之内跌了接近 5%， 应该是市场对他讲的其中有一部分内容不太满意，所以我们就来判断一下，这些是市场的过度的反应，还是公司的基本面确实出了问题？
Crackdown. Can you talk about the rollout of paid sharing and what changes Netflix implemented between the first quarter and second quarter rollout that seems to have had a big impact?
Yeah, sure. Jumping right into it. All right. So, I guess as you kind of step back, before we rolled out paid sharing, we had over 100 million borrowers out there that weren't paying for Netflix. So it was great to have all that watching, but it was free watching, and we had to address it because if we want to drive that kind of sustained kind of flywheel of healthy revenue growth and reinvestment back into the business, better service for our members, we had to address all that free viewing. So we were working at it for a long time, and we were working hard to come up with a solution that was good for consumers, good for members, and good for the business. And so that's why we kind of approached it with a lens of what's value we can bring to the equation. And when you think about some of those consumer-facing benefits or value propositions, was things like the ability to transfer your profile more easily and transfer my list, or to manage your devices more easily, or even because there was a broad range of borrowers, things like the extra member where folks could effectively subsidize an account for their grandmother, their cousin, etc. So we tried to be pretty thoughtful there and balance it. And what we saw going from, early in the year, we were prepared to roll this out broadly to, more than 100 countries, more than 80% of our revenue base. And we saw some opportunities. The opportunity we delayed it by a quarter, basically, was pretty tactical at that point. So the solution was largely in place, but we saw some opportunities primarily to make it more intuitive, that experience for members, and a little cleaner on the messaging. So those sort of small tweaks can be pretty impactful. And that's sort of what we did. And when you see it in the rollout, what happened was, you saw it in our results in Q2, is we're pleased with how this is rolling out. It's the cancel reaction, which is the big kind of upfront risk as we kind of start to enforce and intervene on members. How are folks going to react? And we didn't see those big spikes. So it was much more muted cancel reaction, better retention of our existing member base. And it's been kind of healthy characteristics now going forward in terms of bringing on new paid membership, both in terms of individual accounts as well as extra members. But that was really the main thing. It's not super sexy, frankly. It was some tweaks in the background, but it made it more intuitive and easier for our members.
And can you say anything about the signups and what tiers they're going to?
So I'd say generally, in terms of just the nature of kind of how this is rolling out in general, one, as I said, it's been healthy on the retention front. In terms of signups, first, it's been also a pretty healthy mix between spin-offs onto individual accounts and those extra member set accounts. It's a little bit in favor of those individual accounts, which is good, but we want to provide value to both. But fundamentally, we think having your own Netflix account is probably a better experience. But if folks want to be, if households want to have an extra member, that's great too. And that's why we provide that. And then in terms of those spin-off accounts, it tends to be in general, it's a pretty healthy mix across our member profile. It's a little, we've got the ad tier and the non-ad tier. The ad tier is a healthy mix in general across our plans, but it's the minority because we have multiple plans. It skews a little bit more towards ad-free in these spinoffs. So still a healthy kind of proportion going into the ad tier, but a little bit higher mix into the ad-free relative to organic sign-up, which makes sense because a lot of these folks have been enjoying Netflix for a long time ad-free. So it's slightly skewed in that direction.
And how far through this rollout do you think you are? Even in the U.S., like a lot of people still feel like they've been untouched so far.
Looking for hands in the room of whether you've interviewed done. Well, we talked about in the last call. This is something that's going to roll out over multiple quarters, and so we're in the midst of that. It's a bit, paid sharing. It's a bit front loaded, right? So you see kind of the impact. It rolls out over at least a few quarters, and that's just the nature of while we've rolled it out broadly. When you think about kind of behind the scenes, the nature of our interventions and who we're intervening on or enforcing on more aggressively than others, that's part of the impact. The other is just the nature of the folks that are converting tend to be, at least initially, that are more engaged with Netflix to begin with. And then sometimes it's not totally in our control, because even as we're enforcing, well, if someone isn't really interested in Netflix at that particular time, we have to have that right title. So it's not until, if it's Virgin River or Rebel Moon, you pick your title, that all of a sudden sparks their interest to come join Netflix. So that's why we say it's going to roll out over multiple quarters in terms of, but you see it more in the member growth, the paid member growth initially, and then it builds into revenue growth. And then it's just something ultimately that doesn't ever fully go away, right? Because then we just have a better net, if you will, in order to capture paid memberships and a bigger paid membership base to grow on going forward.
So, can you give us some color in terms of financial impact 2024 versus 23? It sounds like it's a build.
It's a build, but as you say, there's this front-loaded impact in general, but then we have the benefit of kind of full-year impact in 24 versus partial year impact in 23. So you have those two dynamics at play. So revenue is building through 24, but it's kind of that partial year. So you see the member impact front-loaded, and then you get into 24, and you're kind of through that kind of bigger front-loading of MHU, but you get a full-year impact. So I'm not going to give you specific numbers, but the benefit carries through in 24.
这个比较长，因为它有大概3-4个问题，都是这样的一个，就是关于密码分享，他问一下进展。CFO 的回答当中基本上包含了几个层次啊。他说我们一开始注意到有大概100个 million 的用户是跟别人分享密码。那我们怎么理解这100个 million 的用户呢？因为它整体的公司现在的付费用户才240个 million， 所以这是很大的一个比例。所以他说呢，我们为了把这部分人转换，他就考虑了多种情况，比之前想的迟了1个季度，就是想让大家转换，从界面上，从这个 messaging 听起来更清楚、更容易。现在看起来到2季度，它的转换效果非常不错。这个不错呢，第一个是当然是用户的增加，第二个很重要，他看到了说，之前担心的会不会有很多人，你现在让他付费，他就会干脆取消。但这个呢，其实没有看到，他们并没有看到很大的取消的现象产生，多数人还是按照他们的计划转换了。所以后面问题就问他说，这些转换当中，大概是这些人去了什么样的档次啊？就是哪些 tier？CFO 的回答是这样，他说我们看到大概去了不同的档次，整个比较平均，但相对比较多的呢，是多数人就选择成了自己的个人账户，而不是依附在之前的某个家庭。所以呢，这可以从侧面证明，原先的那种密码分享，很多人是不是家庭成员长大了以后自己出去，而是可能是分享给朋友或者是不相关的人。所以呢，这是一个情况。第二个，他就讲说，多数人其实选择的方案是没有广告的，就相对比较高的那个档次，因为这些人过去几年一直享受着没有广告的这个档次，可能已经相对习惯了这种方式。那最后他讲的这个时间啊，他说时间我们是未来几个季度会逐步的推入啊。当然一开始这2个季度可能是看到用户增长最快的，但是呢，所有的转换要在未来几个季度啊，在1-2年之内才能逐步实现。实现的原因有2个，第一个是我觉得从 Netflix 本身，管理层不想把所有的收入、所有的增长全都放在1-2个季度，所以他想后面比较平缓、比较容易来计量，这是一个，所以他推进的速度是可控的。第二个呢，他说从用户的角度啊，哪怕你现在让他去变成一个付费的用户，单独计价，但是呢，他可能现在看到的 Netflix 里面没有自己喜欢看的剧集，所以他可能是现在不转化，等到什么时候他喜欢的剧集，比如有下个季，或者是有新的剧集，他感觉比较有兴趣，他就会被迫加入啊。所以呢，这种情况是由内容啊 Netflix 的剧集、电影、电视剧来推动的，而不是 Netflix 本身可以控制的。这要一直到2024年才能真正完全结束，所以他讲说2023年我们会有一部分的实现，2024年全年呢会看到整体的效果。
So in terms of specific numbers, you've never specifically said how many more than 100 million households there are. Do you want to give us any color?
How many more than 100
million?
Is it 100 million plus? It's 100 million plus. No, I'm not going to give you a number. There's interesting dynamics with that because folks are coming in and out of the system all the time. So it's always a bit of an estimate as to who's in the system because there's always circulation of folks who are watching Netflix or not. But 100 million is already a pretty big number if you kind of think about, our kind of growth opportunity generally. We have about at the end of the last quarter, about 240 million paid members. We had about 100 million or more that are kind of watching and not paying. And then, there's a total universe of smart TV plus households or connected TV households of about 500 million. So there's another, so that's 240, there's another 150 million-ish there. So think of it as 240 million-ish paid members and at least that many that we still have the ability to kind of bring into Netflix, either through converting kind of free watching to paid or capturing others. And then that connected TV universe is going to continue to grow over time.
So a long runway on that side. And then moving on to advertising.
所以这个他就讲说你能不能讲一下具体你是100多个 million 是到底是多少所以 CFO 就举了几个数字，我觉得有必要讲一下。他说我们现有的付费的用户是240个 million， 我们现在的认为的可以转化的这些已经在看我们的内容但是没有付钱的是100个 million， 所以这些呢多数也会变成我们的付费用户。整个市场有多大呢？他说只按现在看总体来讲的话，现在美国包括全球加起来整个有500个 million 的智能电视的用户，就是这些它是可以未来最终有可能成为 Netflix 的付费用户的。所以这500个 million 减去 Netflix 已经有的240，再减去这个现在正在转化的100，所以大概还剩下150个 million。所以呢，他说认为自己现在看用户的数量可能也不到一半的水平不要忘了整个的所谓的500个 million 的这些家庭呢未来还会继续增长，所以这不是一个不变的数字。
There were press reports that said that Netflix, that you were happy with your upfront performance or it was in line with your company expectations. Could you give us any details on what actually you did in the upfront?
Yeah, no, we were pleased with the upfronts. This is, this is probably technically our kind of first upfront that we really went through because we did sort of a quasi in our first year, but we missed the upfront. So this was really our first upfront as our inaugural. And as you say, we met our expectations. So we closed deals with all the major holding companies, with a bunch of independent agencies. We closed the deals at the top, sort of the top CPM of the kind of streaming market. So we kind of preserved and reinforced the premium environment of our ads environment. And we also started to kind of prove out that obviously we have something that we believe is attractive to advertisers, and we're seeing that in terms of the quality of the kind of amazing content that folks, brands, and advertisements are sitting side by side with or integrated with, in terms of the engagement of the audience and some of the capabilities we're starting to bring in. So it's really still kind of really infancy in terms of that innovation, but things like the ability to do sponsorships for our top 10 titles. So that was really early innovation, but something that's a bit more innovative than kind of the old legacy linear model of trying to kind of guess which titles to buy into. There you can kind of buy into the biggest of Netflix dynamic basis, and we basically sold that out. So all those things were good, but it's still I just want to kind of reinforce we're still in the crawl, walk, run stage. So it is not easy to build an ad business from scratch. We've got a lot of work to do. This was a good first step, but again, as you've seen in our guidance, what we've done so far is not material to the overall revenue of the business. It's something we're building into, and we have to get better across the board.
Right.
这是让市场不满意的一个回答的一部分所以他这个问到后面几个问题呢都是问广告。所以在这个之前呢，我们可能首先要讲一下什么是 upfront 这个词呢是只有在广告业才能用到。我们现在理解的互联网的广告其实没有这个概念你如果投在 Google Facebook， 你应该是说你设定你的目标，设定你要花多少钱，你要针对什么样的用户群，你每天花了多少钱你就交多少钱就好了。所以这个是实时的花费，你不用一下就像 Facebook 和 Google 说我必须在你这个平台上打算未来1年要花多少钱，所以这种长期的 commitment 是不需要有的。这跟传统的媒体购买是完全不同的。传统的媒体购买呢，你要先预付一部分钱去赌你现在要买的这个平台里面这些电视的一些节目当中哪个未来有可能会成为爆款。每年在2季度很多电视节目网络就会把那些广告公司大的广告主像宝洁可口可乐这些都请过来，说我给你看一下我后面半年我有什么样的电影电视剧会在我这里面播出我跟你讲一下是谁导演的，谁主演的，是什么样的故事，我觉得它未来为什么一定能成为爆款。比如说你喜欢的这个电视剧投广告，那你必须要先跟我现在就签协议，承诺你未来在我这里面我给你什么样的广告，你要付多少钱。所以这个是在广告没有播出没有看到任何效果的情况，你在 upfront 就要 提前预支的款项。所以呢，这个每年在广告业内啊是一个非常重大的一个活动啊。那今年第一次他是做了这么一个活动，所以这个活动他说整体效果非常好。他们见了大的几家广告公司那些重要的广告主因为我之前就讲过 Netflix 的内容由于它比较 premium， 它的内容是比较优质的，所以很多广告主都对此就是垂涎已久，很久之前就想在这边做广告，所以呢，它推出了就很受欢迎。而且呢，它中间还有创新我们刚才讲了，你在传统的这种 upfront 要购买的时候，你其实不知道未来半年你现在看到他给你介绍的未来要推出的这些电视剧哪些有可能爆款，很多情况下你是要靠猜的所以有时候你可能猜中了，你就会赚的很多就是你可能花比较少的钱就拿到一个爆款，很多时候你猜错了，你可能就是花的钱就不值。但现在的 Netflix 就不一样，它就推出了一个产品叫 Top 10就大家如果看那个界面就看到，那每个国家都会说你这个国家现在大家最喜欢观看的10个电视剧集是什么所以呢 Netflix 这种方式，这就是说对广告者来讲说，你可以直接赞助我这个 Top 10，就你的广告会跟这些放在一起，那你就不用管哪个未来会变成爆款，因为只要是这个爆款的都是你赞助的广告，所以这个的吸引力一下就上升了很多，因为你就完全不用猜未来哪家会爆款。所以呢，他说这个广告的形式很受欢迎，他已经完全卖光了。但是呢CFO 呢，因为他是财务嘛，相对比较谨慎，所以他就马上又自己打了个补丁说我们其实现在呢还是很早期的，在广告这方面，如果说人是爬、走、跑这么3个阶段的话，那我们肯定现在属于爬的阶段所以是非常非常早期。因此呢，我们现在这个广告对我们现有的经济收入影响不大。所以呢，这句话可能是让市场有点 surprise 觉得说这个没有之前想的那么大，至少现在看起来所以我觉得这个其实不应该是那么大的问题，它可能主要是相对比较谨慎的一种表示。
You just said you have had a very unique approach. I have to say, being in upfronts for decades, like it was the most innovative, fast-paced, really to the point, and US for the sale. It was a great presentation, and you talked about the capabilities, the top 10, and following viewers from show to show. Like it was just very interesting and very different. But, we all know you have quality premium video. It's an uncluttered environment with 4 to 5 minutes an hour. You reach all the demographics. I mean, you have a lot going on for you. So those are the attributes. But so can you maybe give us the other side? Like, what are the gating factors in obtaining a share of ad budgets?
Yeah, so, as you say, we think we have a good number of things working in our favor. And just stepping back, I'm super bullish and confident in the long-term opportunity of ads as advertising is big incremental revenue and profit contributor to the business. But we do have to build it over time. And there are those secular things. So it starts with just, there's the natural shift of engagement from linear to streaming, and then the dollars follow. We've seen that with subscription. We think advertising is going to follow a similar pace. It's also kind of addressing a consumer proposition of a great kind of set of entertainment across film and TV and ultimately games titles at a accessible price point for consumers. So that's also great as well. But then the key for us is like, with that, how are we going to build it into a really big business? So we have sort of stepping back two big priorities. One, we have to scale the reach of our ads tier. So we need advertisers want a scaled solution. So that is number one priority. And then number two is to better monetize that reach. So we have the kind of benefit of scarcity today, but we want to create less scarcity by driving a lot more reach. But then, we know we can deliver engagement, but we have to deliver reach this year. And then obviously better monetize through the combination of kind of capabilities and go to market resources. So how we do those two things and address those two priorities become very much tactics, and it's a lot of tactics that we layer on over time. You start to see it, if we use reach as an example, it started with just improving the feature set, right? So we started with what was basically a feature set that looked like our basic ads free tier, and then we improved video quality, we added streams, we achieved content parity, so that's kind of a piece of the puzzle. But over time, we, as part of rolling out paid sharing, that was another reach driver because some of those folks that spin off into advertising accounts. And there's a bunch of other tactics that we'll continue. So assume that is a big priority for us is to kind of drive that reach and scale. And then, of course, we'll continue to kind of build out our monetization capabilities.
这个他就问说，你的广告的增长他其实这个分析师讲说，你这个 upfront，就他自己肯定也参与了，说是未来 就是变得会很好，因为他看到像现在做的 upfront 就跟之前的那些媒体的业主做的非常不同所以很有新意，分析师对这个评价很高，所以他就问他说，那你未来的增长是怎么样的？所以 CFO 的回答基本上是2个层面，当然他总体是非常乐观的。他说如果从行业来讲，我们看到明显的对我们有利的2个第一个就是说，从整个大家从传统电视的这种看电视这种行为，现在基本上都在 streaming 都在往流媒体这个方向在转，这种转化呢是会持续而且会越来越快的。就是说随着大家这个习惯改了，从一个媒体转到另外一个媒体，那广告主的预算肯定要从一个媒体要转到 streaming， 所以这个也是非常确认的要发生的事情。它第2个呢，就是我们广告毕竟是给我们一些用户如果他本身预算有限的话，他现在就有一个相对更便宜的选择他可以接触 Netflix 的这些很好的内容，但自己呢又不用付之前那么多钱所以这2个是对他来讲的话，行业上比较有利的2点。他说我们还是要做很多工作这工作当中其实他贴2个，第一个你就是要有很大的规模这个广告业规模是很重要的。如果你做一个广告公司，或者是你做一个媒体的公司做购买所以你如果是要让你去50几家公司，每家公司规模很小，你就会很烦，因为你要付出很多精力。那大家只需选择在 Google、Facebook 上做主要的广告投入，那就因为他们规模够大，我只要跟1-2家合作，我的预算都可以花完，而且效果不错。所以对 Netflix 来讲，它的规模也是最重要的，就是持续还要用户的增长。第2个呢，就是你有了用户增长之外，你就要把这个 engagement 做起来，然后逐渐的用不同的方式把自己的界面做好，把自己这种变现的能力能提高。所以他后面讲了很多具体的，就是怎么把自己的变现能力来提高的问题。
Microsoft obviously helped you get off the ground incredibly quickly, fastest probably anyone's ever kind of taken an ad platform to market. But what capabilities do you still need to build out internally to drive your own internal advertising capabilities?
Yeah, well, sure. Yes, it is something that we kind of think about it both ourselves and Microsoft. I mean, this is a partnership. As in all partnerships, we're always pushing ourselves to be better and do more. And collectively, we're trying to build a really big and successful ads business. And part of that is, as you say, things. First of all, we both have to do a lot more, but then there's a share of things that we have to do in terms of our own internal capabilities. It's things like better targeting and relevance capabilities on our end, measurement capabilities. And a big part of it is just the go-to-market. So Salesforce and sales support and really kind of supplementing Microsoft's capabilities in market.
所以这个呢，就是刚才的 follow up， 跟微软合作，微软是他的广告的合作伙伴。那你内部要建立一些什么样的能力所以他主要的讲了2部分，一部分就是说你的广告要有针对性你要知道你现在面对的用户是什么。那第2个呢，你要做 measurement， 你要可以衡量你这个广告在我这里做了之后对你的品牌有什么样的影响，对你直接的销售的收入有什么影响。 Netflix 这个能力也要自己要做。第2个当然就是销售你要知道怎么把这个产品卖给人家，去市场上怎么介绍，为什么要在 Netflix 这样的平台做广告所以这个相对是比较简单的。下面有个问题是比较重要，他就提到了那个平均用户收入的问题。
Despite having two powerful, I'm going to use your word, ARM, not ARPU, but you have two powerful ARM drivers in password sharing, crackdown, and your advertising build-out. And even though you have password sharing and advertising, your guidance for Q3 was flat to down year-over-year ARM. Can you just walk us through the drivers impacting the third quarter ARM and how that will change, coming into the fourth quarter and beyond?
Yeah, sure. So, when we think about, ARM, average revenue per member, sorry for those who love ARPU, but it's on our ARM, or average revenue per member, we guided to kind of on an FX neutral basis, flat to slightly down in Q3, similar to Q2. And the dynamics you see there, if kind of break it apart, that we've got some things that work in our favor and some that don't in terms. So starting with the don't, or the headwinds, it's things like when you think about the member growth that's coming for our service, 90% plus of that growth is outside of the U.S. and the U.S. is our highest ARM market. So there's a kind of a country or region mix that's going to be a slight drag on ARM. And as an example, APAC has been our largest growth region and our lowest ARM region. So that's one natural thing that will continue to happen as we continue to grow. That'll always be a little bit of a drag on ARM. The second thing is while our plan mix is generally quite stable, across tiers, whether it's premium, standard, etc. While we're going through this kind of early rollout of paid sharing, if you think about the nature of it, folks are spitting off into their own accounts. Some of those folks were for affordability and other reasons on the premium tier. So there's a little bit of a move out of premium and others. This is slight, but relative to historical, so that's a little bit of a drag. And then we do have some ancillary revenues that run through our business. They're small today, like consumer products. Sometimes we have events and other things. And there were some dynamics from Q2 of last year to Q2 of this year, and same with Q3 and Q3. I think last year we had like Netflix as a joke or something in Q3 of last year that we don't have this year. These are small things. This is all like noise in the system typically, and offsetting that, we have the benefit on ARM of extra member. So that's starting to build, but it's not that significant yet in terms of our overall member base, right? You can, as we said, if you just do the math, we had 5.9 million paid net adds in Q2. And of that, we also said we have a pretty good mix between kind of spin-off accounts and extra member, but a little bit in favor of spin-off accounts. So not all of our net adds were because of paid sharing to begin with. And then if you think about a subset of that on extra member, it's just not a huge amount of extra members to drive ARM yet. And we said ads, which is also a driver of ARM, it's just not that material yet. So those things kind of cancel each other out, but they're generally noise in the system that you wouldn't see. The real story is that we haven't been increasing pricing since early 2022 when we've lapped price increases. So that's kind of what you're seeing in the ARM trends in both Q2 last quarter and what we guided to for Q3, because the main action we're taking to accelerate revenue growth this year is the rollout of paid sharing. And the way paid sharing shows up initially is bringing in more paid members, which is not an ARM driver, it's a paid member driver, which shows up in revenue acceleration. Over time, as we guided to in Q4, we expect to have kind of a revenue continue to accelerate, but it's not, I just don't want to manage expectations. It's still not a major ARM story this year in 2023. It's not going to be in Q4 either. Not giving you specific guidance, but we really have to get back to what is more balanced kind of revenue growth in 24 and beyond through a combination of continuing to grow our membership. Our pricing philosophy has not changed. You can assume over time that's action we'll continue to take as we deliver more value to our members. And ads will, if we do our job well, we will continue to grow in materiality, and that will contribute to ARM too. So again, our North Star is growing revenue, but ARM will be a piece of the puzzle going forward in 24 and beyond.
所以这个它比较长啊，他就讲那个 ARM 其实我们首先声明啊，我们之前有个视频讲过 ARM IPO 啊，所以这个 ARM 当然跟那个 ARM 当然不同，它指的是 average revenue per member， 就是平均每个用户上拿到的收入。说为什么你这个 ARM 这个指标啊，在第三季度是略微有下降或者持平的，到底是什么原因引起的？所以 CFO 的回答非常全面啊，他说对 ARM 本身来讲呢，有好的因素的影响，比如说我们现在有广告的收入，提升我们整个的 ARM 的水平，但这个呢还比较小。问题呢主要是有3个不同的原因。他说第一个呢，就我们整个从用户的角度，我们 90% 的现在的增长是来自于美国之外，因为美国是 ARM 每个用户的收入最多的国家，那你现在的绝大多数都在美国之外，所以呢导致它那个 mix 啊就产生了变化。比如说他说亚洲是用户增长最快的，但是呢 ARM 就是每个用户拿到的收入是最低的，所以这是最主要的因素。它第二个呢，就我们刚才讲的，就把密码分享这个打击了之后，中间呢你可能原来有一个人他是依附于某个家庭的，是比较高的那个档次，但是呢这个人现在单独之后，他可能会选择比较低的一个档次，所以呢这也有很小的影响啊。第3个因素，他就说从收入的角度，就是说他卖一些 merchandise， 所以这些商品呢，他的去年同样的3季度的时候，他们有一些活动，所以导致呢活动收入比较多。今年呢这些就没有了，所以这也是一个影响。所以呢总体来讲，他说有正有负，但是呢还是负的相对要多一些。当然最重要，他说是真正的问题是说我们在去年年初涨了价之后啊，后面一直价格就没有变动，所以导致了他每个平均用户的收入就会比较持平。那这种状况呢会一直基本上持续到今年的年底，那到了明年可能情况不一样了，就是到2024年它的广告收入逐渐可能会反映出来，再加上它可能会有针对性的对一些价格进行上升，所以这2个加在一起就可能明年导致 ARM 可能有上升。说1000到1万，目标是收入的增长，所以呢 ARM 就是每个用户的收入增长是收入增长的一环，但它不是唯一的指标，它只要收入能够增长，其他的东西它是可以调节的作为变量。那下一个问题呢，分析师就问到了 Netflix 长期增长的问题。
term impact of password sharing and I'd say maybe the medium term impact of ads. How are you thinking about the longer term growth opportunity for Netflix?
Long-term growth opportunity for us, I'm super bullish on the long-term growth opportunity. I think, for us, the opportunity to grow the business is, I would start with the fact that we think we're starting in a really good position. So we're starting in a leadership position in terms of revenue, profit, and engagement. Just to put that in perspective, you see the revenue and profit relative to kind of industry profitability, at least in streaming profitability and engagement. Fun facts, I guess. So in the first 28 weeks of this year, we had the number one streaming TV series 27 of those 28 weeks with Nielsen reported in the U.S. and the number one film 24 of those 28 weeks. So we are by far a leader in engagement as well. I think when Nielsen reported for their top 10 that they reported in 2022, we had 5x the engagement of our nearest competitor in terms of view hours in that top 10 and 3x of all of our competitors combined. So engagement is a key barometer of kind of health and future growth of our business, because from engagement, that is really a proxy for member satisfaction and joy. And then also it kind of drives key metrics like retention. So with that starting point, and the question is like, okay, it's a good starting point, but how do we grow from there, and what are our opportunities to grow? And like on every measure, and you've heard this from me, Jessica, so it'll sound boring, but like on every measure, we see opportunity to grow. So whether it is like the shift from linear to streaming, when you think about view share, we're less than 10% view share in every market in which we operate. And streaming is still sub 40% of the overall TV viewing in all those markets. In many markets, it's still in the 10-15%. In the U.S., it's almost at 40%. So there's still that secular shift to streaming and our ability to grow our view share. If we look at kind of consumer spend or industry spend in the markets in which we operate, it's over $600 billion globally. We're at a little over $30 billion of revenue last year. We're about 5% of that addressable revenue market. So we're small there as well. And then in terms of kind of household penetration or TV penetration, we talked about it before. There's about 500, we estimate, smart TV or connected TV households around the world. We're only in about kind of 240 million on a paid basis. So we've got another kind of doubling of that by addressing paid sharing, and then folks that aren't enjoying Netflix today, and that market's going to continue to grow and get penetrated. So to do all that stuff, what we're focused on is to grow into those big markets. We have to improve every aspect of our service. So it's why we're so focused on improving content, improving the product, improving marketing, and better monetizing all of that engagement. And it starts with content, right? Because that's what our members care about most. So we think we've built up a pretty durable and growing competitive strength in that it's really kind of tough to do those things well, because it means being great at commissioning and developing content in all these countries around the world with different languages, cultures, tastes, affinities, wrapping technology around it, user interface and discovery, payment systems, collecting payments in all these places around the world, driving the zeitgeist and conversation. So most companies are pretty good at one or two of these things. We're really good at one or two of these things. We think we're pretty good at all of them, and we just need to keep getting better. And if we do that and stay focused on it, we think we can continue to drive more and more of that entertainment value and build a really big business.
这个比较长，他就是说，其实你能不能讲一下你的公司中长期增长都是一些什么地方啊？所以他就 CFO 呢，首先讲说，其实不要讲增长了，只是看现在的我们的现状，我们就挺满意的。你看所有的流媒体的公司当中，我们是收入有不错增长的，而且有比较好的利润啊。他指的应该是他的那些传统媒体公司现在转流媒体啊，就做得非常辛苦。我们之前讲过，包括第4年有大量的亏损。它第3个更重要的就是 engagement， 就是大家用户在这个平台上花费的时间。他说这也是其他平台比不上的啊。他说我们非常在意这个关键的指标，原因是呢，我们如果是知道用户花了多少时间，我们就知道说他的满意度是怎么样。因为你如果不满意，你肯定不愿意花这么多时间看 Netflix 的剧集。第二个呢，你如果是花的时间越多，cancel 我们的这个订阅的可能性也就越少啊。所以他说这个 engagement 它是关键因素，因此呢，他们也非常在意，而且呢，现在看起来情况非常不错。他说我们2023年现在的28个星期当中，如果按照电视剧集啊，我们有27周我们市场上最流行的剧集是我们家的。如果按电视的话，我们有24周啊，所以只有4周没有。所以从这个角度就觉得他觉得用户的关注度、花的时间以及他的用户喜欢的内容，他都是行业非常领先的。那第二部分他讲到未来的发展，他不用讲具体的数字，但从几个指标上就可以看到未来的发展还有很多。他说比如说我们现在看到我们整个的观看时间，我们是 大概10%不到啊，所以他说在这里面的话，在美国啊，就是因为 streaming 这种流媒体的模式已经比较普及了，占到整个电视观看时间的40%，但是在其他的很多国家啊，这个指标要低很多，可能有些只有10%。大家从传统看电视，现在逐步过渡到通过 Netflix 这些类似的方式，流媒体的方式来看电视，这个还有很大的增长空间。他第二个，我如果看用户的花费，我们在现有的这些电视啊、广告啊、这个游戏这些内容这些方面啊，用户一年的花费大概是600个 billion 啊，全球的。那我们现在的一年的收入只有30个 billion， 所以我们市场份额大概只有 5% 啊，所以如果从这里面看，未来的增长也是比较大的。第三个呢，就是我们之前讲的啊，智能电视的这个用户，全球有500个 million 的家庭，我们现在呢还不到一半的这样市场份额，你未来可能的增长会有很多，但你真正能不能拿到更高的市场份额，不是别人说了算的，因为关键看你啊，你怎么能够执行。关键呢，对他来讲就是内容的质量，所以他就说我们花了很多时间，保证我们有最多最好的电影和电视剧的内容。同时呢，他说很多别的方面也很重要，比如说你整个产品的界面是不是非常友好，大家能不能很容易在你这个界面当中发现他喜欢啊并想看的内容。还有一个就是包括一些界面的流畅度，包括你支付然后付款的灵活性，这些呢很多看起来是小节，但是加起来就会对用户有很大的影响。他说很多公司可能在我们讲的内容啊、科技啊这些方面有1-2个方面可能做得不错，但是呢我们是在所有方面都做得不错。这家公司是唯一解决了第一个科技，第二个内容啊，就是互联网的公司像 Google 啊、Amazon 跟它竞争，它有技术啊，所以科技上应该没有问题，但是呢内容它不知道怎么做。然后一般的像迪士尼这种传统的媒体跟公司跟它竞争的话，可能内容上跟它有相比之处，但是呢从科技上又大大不如，所以呢它就是在整个的这个所有的这些方面呢都是非常平衡，做得很好的一家公司。所以这是理解 Netflix 非常重要的一个地方，就是它的核心竞争力到底在什么地方。
So most or some, but maybe most of your competitors or streaming services have recently announced price increases. Do you view the price increases by competitors, like, does that give you confidence to raise price, or conversely, is it an opportunity to be an even bigger share gainer?
I think it's good for the industry generally that folks are, I would say, pricing a bit more appropriately to the value that they're delivering, right, as opposed to just subsidizing and giving away the product. But we really don't price to our competitors. Our pricing philosophy is unchanged. We start with delivering amazing entertainment, amazing TV, amazing film, and increasingly, hopefully, amazing games to our members at scale, delivering more and more value and then pricing into it. And for us, it's about being more sophisticated in how we monetize that entertainment value, that engagement, and ultimately building that kind of widespread in price options to both address at one end really accessible great accessibility into Netflix with a great feature set. You've seen us do more of that in the past 12 months. We've lowered prices in many countries around the world where initially when we went global, it was sort of a skim strategy. It wasn't super sophisticated and we were overpriced in a lot of these smaller countries, small percentage of revenue, less than 5% of our revenue, but it was over 100 countries where we dropped prices. We also launched the ad tier now in these 12 markets. So these are ways to kind of create more accessibility for Netflix and ultimately grow and optimize revenue. And on the other end of the spectrum, we want more and more ways to kind of monetize and price into fandom. So I think you'll see us continue to get more sophisticated and kind of widen our pricing opportunities while also maintaining a level of simplicity so it's not confusing in terms of the ways to enter and enjoy Netflix.
Right.
所以这个呢，他就分析师问到一个问题，他说我看到你们的很多竞争对手啊，就是在流媒体的价格上现在都有上升，因为他们现在亏损太多了，所以他就问说对你们是什么影响啊？你会有价格优势，你可以吸引更多的用户。所以 CFO 的回答呢相对比较政治化啊，因为牵扯到对竞争对手的评价，多数管理层会比较谨慎，因为不应该直接批评竞争对手。所以他就讲说，他说我们很欣慰看到了我们的同行很多人在调整自己的价格，因为这些做生意嘛，你不可能长期补贴啊，所以你的价格应该反映你的价值。但是对 Netflix 来讲的话，他说对我们没有什么影响，因为我们的整个的定价的战略一直呢不是按照竞争对手的来决定的，还是按照自己的方针。 提供更多更广的选择。他就讲到过去一段时间他们在很多国家其实有降价的，因为他们觉得在这些国家当中大家的支付能力可能有问题啊，原先的价格可能稍微高了一些，所以这些价格它就会下调。那现在呢又加了新的广告这一档，就给广大的用户提供了更多更广的一个选择，你可以比较便宜也可以比较高你可以更多的选择。他说呢在另外一个方面呢，这个市场大家其实觉得已经 OK ready 了，从用户的反应来讲他们也非常喜欢我们的内容我们也很长时间没有提价了，那这个时候我们就可以有选择的在这样的市场进行涨价。所以因此呢它的整体的价格策略就是按照自己跟用户的关系这种需求和供给来决定的。后面一个问题就比较重要，他就终于问到了利润的问题，这也是几个问题合在一起。
Password sharing and advertising are extremely high margin, revenue sources. Can you help us think through the incremental margin associated with these revenue streams?
Yes, they are high margin businesses. They're not 100% margin businesses, but yes, we believe they're high incremental margin. Page sharing is a little bit more like pricing and member growth in terms of fewer direct costs associated with it. Obviously, there's people costs and things behind the scenes. Advertising has some more direct costs in terms of building out sales force. There's revenue share. There's tech stack to build out. There's capabilities there. But both, we wouldn't be getting into these if we didn't think they were big, both revenue and profit contributors to the business. But we don't really parse it individually like that. To be frank, we manage to kind of a global P&L and overall margin. So to me, that's what we should best have an eye towards. And what we're trying to do is build these businesses in a way that, yes, they will be meaningful margin contributors and help us as we accelerate revenue, which both paid sharing and advertising are intended to help us accelerate and sustain healthy revenue growth. And then with that, to start kicking up our operating margins again, our reported operating margins, which peaked at 21%. We've been managing in the 18 to 20% range roughly, but this year is already starting to tick up from last year. We ended at 17.8. We're guided to 18 to 20, so the midpoint of that range is up from last year, and we'll start to tick up again going forward.
And can you help us think through how margin expansion over the next few years?
Yeah, it's so the way we think about building operating margin, and every company has the right to their own philosophy, but ours has always been that it's best to kind of grow our operating margins while we're growing revenue, right? So it's just easier to build that profit muscle as we're growing revenue. So if we really step back, when we went fully global back in 2016, we ran the business almost to break even as we built out that global launch. But then we started ticking up margin we said roughly 3 percentage points each year. So we went from 4% operating margin and we ticked it up all the way to 21% in 2021. If we kind of look forward now, as I said, our priority is to accelerate revenue growth. And as we do that, and to start kicking up margins again. As I said, we're starting to do that this year, and we would expect to do that going forward in 24 and beyond. But we want to balance it with being able to invest in all that big growth opportunity, that big prize that we were just talking about in terms of those big addressable markets. So we want to have a balance. So I don't think, given our scale now that we're at roughly 20% operating margins, I don't think it's really prudent for us to keep growing at 3 percentage points of margin per year. I think that would probably constrain the business too much on the growth opportunity. So we'll grow margins more gradually. At some point, there's probably some peak margin where it's a good balance between peak margin and growth potential of the business. I just don't think we're anywhere near that yet. So we're going to gradually go into it. We've got a bunch of benchmarks, you know them as well as I do, of networks at scale that are well above 20% operating margins. So we think we've got a lot of headroom. We just want to grow into it in a healthy way.
Can you help us think through, what do you think the natural peak margin in the business is?
I don't have a specific number for you other than it's well above where it is today. I mean, you've seen businesses that are kind of, these numbers. There's all these networks in the legacy network, historically they were, fully distributed 100 million households. And so we think we have some inherent advantages in terms of the business we're in today because our distribution scale is so much larger than that. We're already at 240 million. So we have a truly global network that's going to grow from where it is today with content that is designed to have big local impact, but be able to then travel and success regionally or globally. So it's a good scalable content model. We hope to kind of grow at levels that, networks have been at before, but I'm not going to give you a specific number.
Networks meaning like cable networks?
I'm not going to give you a specific number, Jessica.
As much as 50%.
I know you want a number. I'm not giving you a number.
题比较多比较长，所以我放在一起，因为他讲的都是利润的问题啊。我觉得他讲的长期其实非常好，但市场呢不喜欢他个别的一些表达方式，我们就听一下他具体的怎么表达。他一开始问说，能不能跟我讲一下你现在的新的像 密码分享这部分以及广告这部分，在我就是分析看来，这都是利润很高的，因为对他来讲不用付出多少成本他说是的这些不是100%毛利的业务，但是呢利润肯定比我们之前业务要高很多但是呢他说我们公司看整体公司的利润，我们不会把这部分单独给你分出来说。那第二部分呢，分析师就问到说，你能不能跟我讲一下你中长期的公司的利润指标大概是20%还是更高，是什么水平，说一下。 CFO 呢讲说我们如果看过去历史的话，我们从2016年那年是全球 launch 就在多数国家都推出了我们的流媒体服务。我们那个时候全球 launch 的时候呢，是本身是收支平衡的也就是说利润是0就是非常小的。后面每年它都有大概提升300个基点，就提升3%。到了2021年，就从原先的基本接近0提升到21%的利润率，所以这已经是比较好的。但是呢，长期它是要平衡收入的增长跟利润的增长的。就说你如果是你觉得你收入已经到顶了，那你可能主要靠你的规模效应提高利润，就是削减成本。但是如果公司你觉得未来你还有很多增长点，你新的业务需要投资可能还需要并购，那你的钱呢主要应该花到收入的增长上，那利润的增长呢应该是后面要考虑的事情。所以呢这个公司就非常清楚，他说我们要平衡这两者，但我们主要考虑是收入增长，利润增长是第二位的。因此呢，基于这样的考量，他们觉得未来还有很多地方可以增长，很多地方还不停地在投入。因此呢，他觉得未来不可能再指望着他像之前一样每年能提高300个基点，就3%。所以他说利润率的增长的幅度会放缓。但是呢，他觉得最终有一天这个公司有可能会到达一个什么点呢？就是一个peak margin， 就是说在利润率上是最高的，就到那个时候你可能的增长可能基本上到了一个极限你的规模很大，所以你的利润率会变得非常非常高。那 Netflix 现在离那个水平还差得很远，所以他觉得自己未来增长还是有很多年的。但是他也有提，在自己想象当中，这个所谓的最高的利润率应该是什么水平？几十年前美国特别牛的那几大电视网络，他说这些人呢其实利润非常高，因为他们控制了通往美国整个100个 million 的家庭的这些内容的通道，所以他可以收取很高的利润。所以我们希望最终我们能达到这个水平，因为我们从规模上来讲已经超过他了。因为美国这些电视网络全盛的时期也只有100个 million 的家庭，而 Netflix 现在已经有240个 million， 因为它起步就是一个全球的网络。后来分析师就说你如果这样讲的话，那你的目标是未来的利润达到 50%， 因为之前这些网络确实利润率有 50%但是 CFO 当然没有具体的去承认或者否认。毫无疑问的一点是，他认为未来的这个利润率肯定要比现在的 20% 的这个目标要高，而且要高很多。市场我觉得不喜欢的就在于说，他可能之前认为这家公司会像之前一样每年在增长 3%， 现在 CFO 讲说我们要重新考虑增长，因此呢利润率的要求就会变低，所以呢让市场有一点吃惊。我觉得这个应该不是大的问题。下面一个问题也是市场不喜欢的，就讲到了罢工。
It's almost unavoidable, but we have to just at least touch on the strikes. What is the impact on Netflix on the dual strikes in terms of both content and if we include content strategy in that, and also your financials?
Yeah, gosh, we talked about the financial impact or estimated financial impact on the last earnings call. I think really kind of cutting through it, the main thing, and we try to stay focused on the main thing at Netflix. And the main thing is that there's a lot of folks out of work, and the business isn't moving forward. And so it's terrible for all those folks that aren't working. It's not good for the business. So that's what we're most focused on. I mean, at the end of the day, to move the business forward and to have great storytelling and fresh stories for our members, it really is about the partnership with those writers, with those producers, with those directors, with those actors. And so we need that partnership to be healthy. We need to get back to work. That's what we're focused on. And so suffice to say, we are very committed to get back as quickly as possible. In the meantime, we're managing through.
所以这个他其实并没有讲更多更新的内容，他只是说罢工当然对每个人都不好，尤其那些因此失业的那些编剧那些演员所以他是希望这些人能尽快回来工作，他们希望很快的能够跟这些相关的各方达成协议，然后解决这个问题。因为这样的罢工如果时间比较长了，肯定会对所有人的生意有影响。那后面一个问题他就提到游戏。
Moving on, you mentioned gaming a few times, and even though you've been in the gaming area for I don't know, several years now. It still feels like a developing business. Can you talk about your plans and long-term aspirations in gaming and how much investment is needed?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, it is. I mean, it's definitely a developing business. We're almost 2 years into it. I don't remember exactly when our 2-year anniversary is, but we're right around it. And when we launched games, we said, hey, this is a long-term growth opportunity for us and success. It's a giant adjacency. You know, half the world is some form of playing games or a gamer. So it's a giant market, both in terms of users, in terms of, you know, pick your kind of revenue number. So in success, we think it's a big growth opportunity for us. But we started out, you know, in terms of our commitment, we started out first on mobile. Because it's a way for us to get into it faster in terms of development cycles. So you know, fast forward to now 2 years in, we've had about 70 games on our service. It's a range of games from licensed games to games that are now just starting to come out from, and we have 6 studios. We had we grew studios organically, but we also acquired a few along the way to get us started. And so now you're seeing games on service that are a range of both those licenses as well as internally developed, a range of IP from some bigger third-party IP to you know, a new IP like Oxenfree 2, which just came on recently, but also things like Too Hot to Handle and Queen's Gambit and some things around our intellectual property, of an increasing mix of live services and not just kind of playthrough games. But it's still early for us. So ultimately, our vision is to have games that are playable across multiple services, not just mobile. You see us starting to do that a little bit with some early forays into being able to play on the TV as well as mobile, but really right now we're just kind of building our learnings in this business in terms of what works. You see us kind of building out more games with Netflix IP as an intellectual property as an example, and we're spending in a way that is like material but not material to the business yet. So this is not a dip our toe in the water and like, you know, we're going to get out. Like this is we're in games for the long term. It's a relatively small percentage of our overall content budget today, but it's still on an absolute basis a pretty meaningful set of dollars in order to really go after this adjacency for us and this big new content category. And then like we've done with other content categories, as we build confidence in we've already seen at smaller scale the ability for this to be a benefit to the business in terms of driving things like retention and kind of core metrics. We need to prove it out at bigger scale. And then what we've done in the past with other content categories is then we kind of ramp up our investment, and we can do that pretty quickly. But this is think of it as we said early days when we launched it, like this is not a material driver to the business in the next, when we launched, we said in 3-4 years. This is something that's a 5 to 10 year kind of growth impact to the business, and we're still on that trajectory.
所以他讲的游戏做一个长期投资啊，他说我们游戏呢肯定是长期的一个增长领域啊。他做游戏很多人摸不到头脑，我的猜测啊有2个，一个是说他因为竞争的很多是 gaming 的这种平台啊，所以大家如果不去看 Netflix 可能就去玩游戏，那他就讲说，那你既然要玩游戏啊，不如玩我自己的游戏，对吧？所以这是一个考虑，就是从用户的角度，他希望用户一直能用自己的平台，把所有时间花在自己的平台上啊，不管是看电视电影还是做游戏，这是一个考量。第二个一个考量呢，它本身游戏也是一种让客户留存在平台的一种 retention 啊，就像大家说，你如果是喜欢这个剧集啊，你能不能也去玩剧集相关的我开发的游戏？你会对这个剧集有更深的认识，就更不容易啊取消我们的订阅。他说我们现在市场上已经推出了70款游戏啊，有些是别的游戏公司做的，我们拿来；另外有一些呢是我们自己做的，因为他们通过自己内部做以及购买，它现在有6个游戏工作室在 Netflix 里面啊，所以这是从数量上有很大的增长。很多游戏是基于 Netflix 自己的这些电影电视剧的这些 IP 来开发的，所以它不是一个随机开发的一个游戏啊，很多还是跟 Netflix 的内容有共鸣的。第二个就是讲说，它之前主要的游戏是在手机上，现在呢，它就是这个平台要往多平台上去转，包括在电视上可以玩的游戏。总体呢，他说啊，公司还在学习的阶段，它像其他的内容一样啊，所以它从电影、电视剧，现在游戏也做一个内容的一个选项。所以呢，内容开发来讲，它就是要先做一个小的开发，如果看到非常好的效果，它就会加大投入，把这个规模一下扩得很大。它从现在的比较小的这个规模上已经能看到啊，有些游戏比较好的话，可以对 Netflix 的剧集啊那些我们讲的 IP 有促进的作用，因此他觉得这个方式还是可行的，但是呢，这需要比较长的时间。 所以呢，不是3-5年就可以看到的。所以他提的一个观点就是说，这个需要未来5年到10年以后才能真正看到 Netflix 的游戏对公司整个生意模式和营收上的影响。
Obviously, you guys get this question all the time. What is your longer-term goal? Is it sports-focused entertainment and documentaries, or is it something else?
Well, we love sports. We love sports, and it's a big viewing category, right? So we're just what you've seen us to date is like how can we participate in sports in a way that is also good for the business in terms of impact on both member satisfaction, but also return on investment. And so we've been doing that in areas that are much more kind of sports lifestyle programming to date. I think we've done a nice job from Drive to Survive to more and more of that with Quarterback and Living with the Furies and Full Swing and a bunch of others I'm forgetting right now. But so we're I think becoming a great destination for those sorts of stories around sports and compelling lifestyle stories that are really adjacencies and kind of sports adjacent. It's good for the leagues. It's good for our business. Whether or not we get into kind of direct licensing of sports, it's not like we're anti-doing that. It's just it's hard for us to see that as the best return on what really would be billions of dollars of incremental content investment. And so we see a long runway in the areas that we're playing in right now, and it's really hard to do the things we're doing today across film and TV and games all around the world, right? So that focus is one of our advantages. It's good, frankly, that there's some pretty big streaming competitors that are going more and more into sports because it builds that secular trend of the transition from linear to streaming. It's an accelerator of that, which is a good thing for our business. But with a lot of things, we say never, but it's not something that, we found a way to have kind of a big revenue and profit pool from being a licensor.
And another area, sorry for interrupt, but another area that you guys have gotten into, recently is live content. Can you talk about what have you learned? What's interesting to you? Does the advertising capability, have an impact on what kind of content you're looking for in live?
It's not driven by ad capability. It's really about can we do things that further amp up and make it an even better TV or title experience, if you will. So is there a way to create more of an event around some of our programming? And that's what you've seen a little bit with whether it's reunion shows or other types of events that we have done or are looking at. So I would look at it as, hey, it's a proven form of entertainment. It's not like live is really a new thing. It's new for us, but can we do it in a way that's additive to our entertainment experience?
体育这个是几乎所有分析师都会问的，你能不能讲一下你要不要做像 NFL 这种转播，因为要费很多钱。所以他的回答也跟之前的回答基本一样，他说我们当然是不排除做体育的，他们现在你去看 Netflix 有很多体育的相关内容啊，你看不到那些直播的赛事，但是你可能会看到很多人的体育传记啊，或者纪录片呢，或者是介绍各种赛事的这些内容信息，这是有的，很多人也愿意看。但是他觉得做这种体育的超级赛事的转播非常不现实啊，因为你要跟 Google、亚马逊这些公司去竞争啊，这个赛事的费用越来越高啊，那迪士尼都支付不起。所以呢，他说我们基本上不能考虑现在做这样的事情。那第二个问题，他就讲到这种现场活动 live event， 所以说这个其实是对我们来讲是新的啊，但是现场活动做一个内容的种类啊，市场已经做了很多年啊，这个没有什么稀奇的，别人做我们也可以做啊，所以这个应该不是问题。那下面是最后一个问题，就问到他会不会购买别的公司的内容。
A couple of minutes, but your balance sheet is incredibly strong and very liquid, and you're generating, I would say explosive free cash flow from where you were. There are several distressed media assets that are likely to be for sale, maybe not publicly announced, but should be for sale. Can you talk about what your appetite is to be a potential consolidator of IP or studio assets? And, I guess the last part of that question would be any thoughts on capital returns?
Sure. So, we've been historically more of a builder than a buyer. We did about $2 billion of M&A over the last couple of years, but that was in areas that we believe could accelerate our business, whether it is in game studios, as we talked about, or IP driven like the Roald Dahl Story Company. But we, as you say, you mentioned distressed assets. Yes, we have a strong balance sheet, but then it's about how do we best drive the growth in our business in a healthy way. We think that kind of focus and simplicity has been a good thing for us. If we purchase those distressed, one is a high bar for M&A in general for us. We said we're more kind of builders versus buyers, and a distressed asset probably has an even higher bar in a way because of the risk of distraction. And most of those are legacy entertainment assets that, as we see every day, there's very difficult and challenging transitions that go along with that. So, we look at everything. We keep an open mind, but I would just say it would be a very high bar for that to be something that we entertain. We think we've got a really long runway of organic growth that we can stay focused, which then gets to our balance sheet sheet. And our capital allocation policy is unchanged. It's been pretty consistent the last few years, which is great. We first invest in all the core areas of growth of the business. We invest as much as we can into funding that growth and things like ads, games, et cetera, and our core content and service offering. We then opportunistically look at M&A, and then we return excess cash to shareholders. That excess cash is we hold about 2 months of revenue, which is roughly $6 billion. So we've been a little bit high on that lately. So we said we ramp up our share repurchase in the back half of the year. And we probably continue with that kind of a share repurchase program for returning excess cash as opposed to, things like dividends. We like the flexibility of share repurchase.
最后一个问题其实也包括2部分。第一部分他说市场上现在有很多别人的 IP 那些内容他可能自己不想要了，因为要卖，因为他自己要做流媒体跟 Netflix 竞争，可能觉得做不下去了。所以呢，他的回答也很简单，他说我们历史上来看，我们不是一家靠收购别人公司内容去做增长的一个公司。过去几年只花了2个 billion 做收购，主要的收购呢，一方面像我们刚才讲的，他买了几家手机的制作的平台。第二个呢，他就买一些 IP 的版权为了将来自己做大型的电视剧，所以他通常不会花大价钱买那些市场要卖的那些内容。他的收购的门槛通常是比较高的这些内容也不见得长期那么有吸引力所以呢，他觉得买内容这个概率比较低。那最后一部分他就谈到 capital allocation， 就是说你剩下的钱因为你账上有这么多现金怎么办？而且未来现金会越来越多怎么处理？ CFO 就讲说我们资产配置的战略已经跟大家沟通过了，这我们首先会把多余的钱用来看公司的增长，比如说游戏，比如说广告。那这些如果是已经没问题了之后，他就看市场上有没有比较好的收购的机会，再看说还有剩余的资金有没有超过他认为的合适的量。他觉得他的公司应该至少留大概60亿美金的现金以备不时之需。那现在的现金是大幅超过这个数字的，因此呢，在这样的情况下，在已经解决了增长，解决了可能的收购之后，他这些现金就会归还给自己的投资者。那主要的方式就是股票回购因为他说我们不太会考虑做股息，因为股息和股票回购相比，回购呢更为灵活，就今天可以有多的钱或者价格比较低，你就可以多做一些，明天如果你价格比较高，你就可以不用做。股息你如果一旦宣布要进入，那未来基本上只能增不能减也不能停，因为如果一旦有变化，就会向市场发出一些非常不好的信号。所以呢，他觉得股票回购是他主要的回报股东的方式。所以呢，这就是 Netflix CFO 的访谈我觉得这个对我理解这家公司的基本面还是很有帮助的，希望大家喜欢呢请点赞，这会帮助 YouTube 发现我们频道，让更多的人看到。视频不是投资建议，谢谢，再见。